I'm not saying there won't be a little pain, but the market's gone up 40%, 42%, so we might lose a little bit of it. But we're going to have a much stronger country when we're finished, and that's what I'm all about. We have to do things that other people wouldn't do. So we may take a hit, and you know what? Ultimately, we're going to be much stronger for it.
That was the president yesterday talking about proposed tariffs against China and a looming showdown on that front. Here to get a reaction to that is Reince Priebus, former chief of staff to President Trump and the former chairman of the RNC. Reince, thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Hey, good morning.
Now, as you know, this is a topic the president has been talking about for a very long time. So it should come as no surprise to people that he's bringing it up now and building a showdown with China. Do you think he's right? The little pain up front is worth it for this showdown, and how far will he go to get his way?
Well, I think this is classic President Trump, right? I mean, you put the shots over the bow, you set up the negotiation table. Some people freak out about it, but then what you have is ultimately, I think, a solution that gets us in a better place. And if you look at what Larry Kudlow's saying and what Kevin Hassett is saying, who are the economic advisors, you'll see that they're saying exactly that we are setting up a negotiation. And I think we get to a better place, and I think the president then declares victory. And I think if you look at the past actions that have taken place, you look at North Korea in August last year, people freaked out because the president was being extremely aggressive. Tillerson was backing off, and lo and behold, we have an agreement. You look at Afghanistan, the president was talking about pulling out completely. People freaked out. Ultimately, a solution was had. Same thing with Syria, just happened last week. So I think if you look at the pattern, you'll see that the president, in most cases, is negotiating up front, sending shots over the bow, and then setting himself up for a solution. I think that's what you have here.
All right. Well, want to get your thoughts on this as well. The head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, our own Ed Henry did a pretty intense interview with him just a few days ago. And the question is, what is the future for him? Because the president has said he likes the job that Scott Pruitt is doing at the EPA, but there are questions around some of his handling, some controversies over whether he is, in fact, a part of that swamp, taking advantage of first-class flights to private planes, you name it. What do you think should happen? Should he be fired?
No, I don't. I think that what he's got to do is somehow show the American public that he's got the EPA buckled down, you know, come to the table, show how things are going to be different, which I think he's starting to do. But you know, look, if you look at the agenda that he's put in place, the clean water executive order, you look at the energy, the changes that have been made in energy regulations, the coal industry coming back. I mean, he's done, you know, a huge chunk of the changes that have taken place that are making the economy hum again, are in large part from President Trump's orders that Scott Pruitt is implementing. The other dichotomy here, too, is that, you know, Trump world loves Scott Pruitt. So you also have a huge base of the party that actually knows who the EPA director is, which isn't normally the case. I mean, if you asked me who the last 3 EPA directors were, I couldn't tell you.
It's a good point, but is that enough, though? Because you think about the swamp, that's what the president ran on. And policies aside, some of the decisions that the head of the EPA has made have been a perfect example of how the president describes the swamp. So he's in a tough position there, because you can be hypocritical saying, well, I want to get rid of the swamp, but he also has some good policies.
Well, I think people make mistakes, and mistakes don't put people in a swamp. I think what you have is, you know, deficits that are out of control, parties that can't seem to come together and get things done. So look, I hear you. I think it's a tough issue for people to talk about, but I think if you look at the preponderance of the evidence, I think Scott Pruitt is doing a great job. And I think more importantly, we have a 2018 midterm coming up. And I look at what's happened in Wisconsin this past week and where we're going, and it's an issue that I think needs to be focused on.
The left also hates Scott Pruitt because he's been effective on so many things that he wants
to
do. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But you mentioned the 2018 midterms. One of the big things Republicans want to run on are are tax cuts, drawing a contrast to Democrats, none of which voted for the tax bill. Well, Nancy Pelosi, who would like to be Speaker again, was asked what Democrats would do about the tax bill. recently. This is what she had to say.
We'll sit down at the table and say, what would be a tax bill that creates growth, that creates good-paying jobs as it reduces the deficit. It's not about chipping at this piece and that piece. It's about a comprehensive look what our tax policy should be for the future.
So are they going to run against this tax cut?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to, and it's what the party has to be very careful of, because as much as we all know that it's one of the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country and does really well for people in the middle and people at the bottom, which is what the president ran on, they're going to try to get ahead of the Republicans on this, and they're going to label it, as always, this is a tax cut for the extremely wealthy. You were left behind. It's not what the president promised. That's what they're going to deliver. And I was talking about this for a second ago. If you look at what happened in Wisconsin last week and what it means for the future, you know, that was people should look at that election. That was a base election. There was no President Trump on the ballot. There was no Scott Walker. And there's huge Dem turnout, especially in college towns. And that ribbon in the middle, this sort of Trump, Walker, Pete, you know, Jesse Ventura ribbon in the upper Midwest, that piece has to be motivated. And if it's not motivated, you can't win in places like Wisconsin.
And to your point,
and
Reince, in fact, Scott Walker weighed in after that liberal judge got a seat on the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. Quote, tonight's results show me we're at risk of a blue wave in Wisconsin. Big government special interests flooded Wisconsin with distorted facts and misinformation. Next, they'll target me and work to undo our bold reforms. You were there. You were in the room when the president was winning on election night because of states like Wisconsin. What does the current chief of staff need to do to make sure the party is speaking directly to those voters?
Well, for one thing, you have to get ahead of Nancy Pelosi on the tax cuts and show that it works for people in the middle. But secondly, the party, and I think they're doing this, but I would just triple down on it, you have to invest very, very heavily in absentee ballot early vote operations, meaning checking off the list every 70, 80, 90%er for a Republican. You have to put massive field organization on the ground, as much as you can possibly afford, without question. Then I think the party also has to get on campuses again. And I know that people think it's a lost cause. It's not. You have to stop the bleeding, campus coordinators, massive field organization, and there shouldn't be, you know, any money left on the table. And then I would also say, if you've got bad candidates in places and you can replace them, dump them. And recruit better candidates, because one thing the Democrats have done is they've put they've fielded pretty good candidates, and I think the Republicans have too, and I think they've done a great job. But if there's any bleeding anywhere, they need to be replaced.
Last question. Yesterday, the Associated Press had a story that the current chief of staff, John Kelly, is in a tough spot where the president seems to not be listening to a lot of his advice and sort of going his own way. You're in a unique position, the first chief of staff, who was caught in the middle of some of that. What's your advice to John Kelly? What's your situation? What's your assessment of how it's playing out right now with the president?
Well, the president likes to be his own person. I mean, if you look at The Art of the Deal, one of the most telling paragraphs is when he said, I like to keep things loose. I don't want to be overbooked. I like to go to the office and see what develops. That's the president's management style. So I think that actually, personally, I think a lot of it's overblown. I think that the general's doing a great job. I hope he stays for, you know, 3 more years or whatever it takes. But look, I think you have to adapt, and I think he is adapting to the president's style. And the president wants to call the shots, and he also wants people to know that he's calling the shots. And if something gets in between that, it becomes a problem.
Do you feel good about his political acumen as we go into the midterm here?
I do. I do. I mean, obviously, you look at the race in Pennsylvania and everyone's overanalyzing it. You know, the president wasn't on the ballot. If the president was on the ballot, he probably would have won that race. But the problem is that you have the enthusiasm, even on that question, diminished. And so what is the party going to do to make up for the fact that when a party's in power, the other side comes into play? And do you have enough horsepower on the ground and the kind of candidates that can overcome the fact that you're facing that headwind. And there's no doubt about it. It is a headwind, and the calculation is what do you need to do to defeat it and survive it.
Yeah, speaking of acclimating, how's life been post-White House for you?
It's pretty good. I hope you can tell I'm pretty relaxed and having a good time. But no, it's great. But obviously always willing to be supportive of our team. But I look forward to at least doing well in the midterms. I think it can happen, but I think we're going to have to work pretty hard.
Yeah.
We look forward to having you back. Reince Priebus, thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
Thanks, sir.
You bet.